We have the pleasure of welcoming Liane Davey today to our interview series Leaders Hum. I'm Aishwarya Jain from the peopleHum team. Before we begin, just a quick intro of peopleHum. peopleHum is an end-to-end, one-view integrated human capital management automation platform, the winner of the 2019 Global Cody Award for HCM that is specifically built for crafted employee experiences and the future of work with AI and automation technologies. We run the peopleHum blog and video channel, which receives upwards of 200,000 visitors a year and publish around 2 interviews with well-known names globally every month. And now for our guest, Liane Davey has been helping teams worldwide to work effectively and with the right spirit. She is the co-founder and principal of Three Coast Inc. She's the author of the book, The Good Fight, and she's also very well known keynote speaker and facilitator. She's been working towards the betterment of teams in a workplace and hence on improving workplace cultures. We're very happy to have someone of her stature to help all our viewers become better team players and create better teams. Welcome, Liane.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here.
It's our pleasure, Liane. So, Liane, can you tell us a little bit about, what is the good fight all about?
Yeah, it's the idea that there are just natural conflicts, things that come up all day, every day when you work in an organization. And if we try and avoid those things, then the necessary decisions and things we have to do in business just stop happening. So it can affect our productivity, it can affect our trust as team members, and it can create a lot of stress for us as individuals. So The Good Fight is a book that says we all need to get better at conflict and understand how conflict can be a really productive part of a healthy team.
That's interesting. So you do talk a lot about, how do you create better performing teams, right? So what is the crux of building a high performance team? What's the primary focus?
Yeah, there's actually two things that I work on with any team that I'm facilitating. One is that a team needs to be very clear about how their work affects the outcomes of the organization. So we want to get alignment from I know my job, I know how my job fits with your job, I know how we as a team fit in with other teams, and how all of that lines up to adding value for the customer. So really strong alignment and clarity in pretty much every moment of the day about what matters most. That's the first thing. And the second thing is really about the team dynamic. So do we have a level of trust that allows us to communicate transparently, candidly with one another, that allows us to have those conflicts, knowing, trusting that our relationships will come out stronger on the other side. So great teams have those two things in common. They're very clear and very aligned about what they do, and they have strong trust and communication that supports how they do it. Those are the two kind of secret sauce. Yes.
But, as a leader, I'm sure it's very difficult to really understand the mindsets of so many people, and everybody's different in the team. So, how should a leader approach this, and what can a leader specifically do to create a high performance team?
Yeah, so in The Good Fight, I have two different approaches. So one is I provide tools that are tools to help the team leader work through these exercises with their team to both neutralize most conflicts by setting clear expectations, and then normalize the conflicts that are going to stay among roles, because there's natural tension and should be natural tension between our roles. So that's the first piece, is providing all the tools and exercises and everything you need to be able to systemize the kinds of conversations you need. But you mentioned a really great point, which is that every human on the team is a little bit different. And the second half of the equation is much less systemic and much more individual. And that's where I spend a lot of time in The Good Fight, talking about how do you actually have a conversation one-on-one with your folks? How do you learn to communicate with them, and then connect with them to understand what drives them, what are they afraid of, what triggers them, what brings out their best. So a great team leader needs to have these two things going on at the same time. How do we create some things that are common for the whole team through processes and exercises that are easy to facilitate with your team? And then how do we have room for things that are very different, conversations that are different, much more personalized to each member of the team? And a great leader knows how to balance those two. I have a speech called Change Has Changed, and it's about how we're coping with perpetual change, and that was before COVID-19. So what we're doing is we often manage a team overall. Many managers, their primary interaction with their teams are at team meetings or things like that. The problem is when someone's in perpetual change, you don't know if their personal stress response is to become complacent and to kind of check out and lean back, or whether their individual response is to become immobilized by trying to do it all, to become too anxious to act. And so you can't manage by meeting in that kind of a time. You need to understand, is this a person who is too complacent and I need to turn up the heat? Or is this somebody who's, working too hard, trying to cope with too much and I need to turn down the heat? So making room for that very individual type of management, that was important because of where our world was at 2 months ago. It's absolutely even more important when we don't know. There are folks who are thriving in this new work from home environment. They're more introverted. They like that they can have time to focus and concentrate. They hated their open office. And there are folks who are just so craving interaction and the chat at the coffee station. You need to manage those people differently now more than ever.
Right. And what about, you spoke about tools, helping leaders to achieve certain, objectives. So what kind of tools really help out in such situations, and how can tools be, an enabler in creating a good team?
I think there's all manner of different tools. So I talked about some of the tools that help create a shared set of expectations. Those are great kinds of tools. I find there are lots of tools that allow us to get a better insight and understanding of one another as people. So those kind of style tools or personality tools can give a lot of insight and give people a language to talk to one another. Tools that help you run more effective meetings. There is just such a spectrum. But, it's a great time to be looking for some of those tools that will support you, make you feel like you have a process you can work through with your team. It's a great time for that. So I wrote a post recently about, how do we use the technology of communication more effectively during this time? So one of the things I've been noticing is that our communication has started to be very diffused over a number of different channels. So whereas email used to be the primary technology of the workplace, now we've got some people emailing us, some people WhatsApping us, a Slack channel we have to manage, people are texting us, we're getting IMs from folks, WhatsApp from other people. And so one of the things that's really important in this time is to set some guiding principles for your team about how you're going to use the different communication platforms. Try and streamline them so that, because I find I'm already feeling a generalized sense of anxiety from coping with COVID in the first place. Just going grocery shopping makes me worry about, did I touch my face? So I don't need the added anxiety of, did I miss a text from, a customer that I should have found? Or so really starting to use technology as a way of streamlining what's coming at us. That's the simplest way of using technology in this kind of a time more effectively. But I think one that's going to affect almost all of us. So taking a half an hour to agree with your team about what communication tools are we going to use? How are we going to make them more effective? Just Zoom rules, just everybody figuring out about, everybody be on mute, but, make sure people have their cameras on. And the first few rounds of meetings, I know it was sort of some with cameras on, some without. So we've got to figure all these things out, but getting those communication tools and technologies figured out is the first thing we can do to know that this long haul of working from home will be more efficient and more effective.
Yeah, that makes sense. So do you think this, working remotely and, functioning, in such a situation, work from home situation, do you think this will continue even after the pandemic? Do you think people will opt for this option more?
Yeah, my guess, and I don't have a crystal ball, but my guess would be there will probably be a little bit more of it as we're getting better and better at having meetings, conducting business over virtual means. I think people, if you think about people who have burdensome commutes of an hour and a half each way every day, starting to say, hey, let's have on our team a couple days a week where we just assume that people are going to work from home. We could see that they were more productive. We could, I think maybe we'll start to have more of these meeting-free days. So I think there are lots of people who will probably dial up their work from home, maybe a little more. Also, our current model is when you have a meeting, you get on a plane and you go to that meeting. And I think all of us are, I had been on 25 flights in 2020 before the 12th of March. So, how many of those did I not need to take? How many of those could be replaced by really great technology? And we all know this technology is going to get better and better and better in a hurry. So I think we're going to see more of it. That said, I think we now also better understand what these things are not great for. And I think there'll be this craving from many people just to have the casual conversation by the coffee pot that they haven't had in a while. So I hope we go to something balanced. And for me, that's what I'm going to try and do. I'm going to stop to ask the question more. Do we really need to do this in person? And then when the answer is yes, I'm going to be so thrilled that I'm going to be able to actually go and give somebody a hug again. That'll feel amazing. Although one thing that's a big benefit of this is that I think the worst situation, the toughest situation for a team is when some people are together in an office and then some people are in their homes. That's incredibly difficult. And if you've ever tried to call into a meeting where you're just alone and they're in a room and shuffling papers and telling jokes, and so this has been the great leveler. At least everyone is in the same boat. And that's a much better situation for team building than this sort of hybrid model of some together and some not. So there are some silver linings of this situation. I think that's one of them. Plus, a lot of folks who've been in the head office now have a lot more empathy for the folks who've tried to be doing meetings over conference call all this time. And I can see some of them, as people are complaining about background noise or things like that. I can just see the folks who've been, remote all along just being like, oh, now you see, I've been dealing with this for 5 years. So at least that's one benefit.
Absolutely. But what do you think about teams that are, in different geographical locations? How do they build a great team?
It's so hard. So, my best advice is to invest in once a year or at some interval like that, being physically together. Because if you can spend 3 or 4 days together, have time to, we know that there is something important that happens when we eat together. It's probably very primal that as an animal, if you eat with someone, it means you're willing to be vulnerable in front of them. And so we know there are things that happen in the brain when you physically eat with someone. So if you're in a geographically dispersed team, making the investment when possible, once a year or at the start of the team to be physically together, you can then go a long time on web calls and still have that same feeling and that same connection, but wherever possible. If that's not possible, I think you can almost do that virtually. I would schedule in time where there's no agenda. And we've seen a lot of this going on lately. We've seen people having virtual meals with their families. I think that's a really powerful thing you can do. So if everyone on your team pick that time spot that's the best for your, I know I'm scheduling a meeting for next week I'm in the Eastern time zone, in the New York City time zone. We have people in the California time zone and someone in China. So trying to pick a spot that works for those 3 time zones is very difficult, but find that spot and just turn on the webcams for half an hour to just chat. Find the agenda-free time. If you can't be together literally, then at least be together without having an agenda. Just time to chat. Where are you at? How's it going?
Makes sense. And how much of this concept of OKRs and key performance indicators, are you a believer in these concepts to build high-performing teams?
Yeah, I think measurement is really, really important. I think the hard thing is picking the right measures. So first of all, picking a small enough number that it's things you can really focus on. But the challenge of that is as soon as you pick too few, then people tend to find a way to game the system. They'll find a way to make those measures look good by letting other things slide. So you have to have enough that you've got some tension among the measures to make sure we don't have people just gaming the system. So that's important. Making sure people have confidence in the measures, that the way they're being measured feels valid, but also that the goals and the objectives seem within reach. It's okay to have a stretch, but as soon as those measures feel so far away that I'm like, forget it, I'm never going to achieve that. So it's really hard. So yes, measures are incredibly important. Picking the right set is hard. Finding the ways to measure them that people are bought into, setting the right goals that feel like they're motivational without being demotivational. It's hard work.
Yeah. Right. And what's your opinion on the gig economy? Because there are a lot of kinds of gig economy: of the freelancers, the contract workers, and the laborers, the people who are doing something on projects. So now that we think is going to evolve in the coming future, if you consider a lot of millennials who are in the workforce and they like doing this, but after the COVID, do you think that's going to change? What's your opinion?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because you can think about the gig economy in 2 very, very different categories. So, I'm a consultant. I've been a part of the gig economy for many years. It works for me. I love it. But I am in a position of privilege, and I'm in a position to be able to, make enough when I am working to save for rainy days and global pandemics, to have that kind of control, to be able to take the work I want and not take the work I don't want. But that is privilege, and that is not what the gig economy means to so many people. And so many of the younger folks who didn't work during the 2008 financial crisis, I think, might have enjoyed the flexibility of the gig economy and liked that and liked not being tied down, but then aren't yet familiar with what it means to then not have a source of income for a period of time. They didn't probably have the savings that they needed. They don't have the healthcare benefits, those sorts of things. So we're going to see a lot of people be hurt very badly in the gig economy in the next little while. So I think we have to think about that. The ones that worry me are the organizations that claim people are contractors for their benefit, while these corporations are sort of massive and not needing to take care of people because they claim they're contractors, when really those people, basically are tied to them, do not have the freedom of the gig economy. So I think we're going to get our definitions a lot more clear. I think these lawsuits that have been going on about whether somebody is a contractor legally or not, I think we're going to see more of that. And we're going to see a lot of sober second thought about, is the gig economy really for me? Am I okay with having no safety net? And I think it's going to be different in countries. I'm Canadian. It's different here where everyone has healthcare. There's nobody that's going to be without healthcare because they're a gig worker, versus in the US where, the gig economy is going to be feeling very, very vulnerable at the moment. So there's going to be a big reckoning about the gig economy, I think, in the next little while.
Right. And do you think that workplaces over time, they've become more inclusive of gig workers? Have they become more open towards being equal to FTEs, the full-time employees, and the gig workers?
Yeah, I think for the most part they are. I think it's going to depend on the caliber of the gig workers. So I think if you're really good, people understand that, having a really talented resource where you have the flexibility to say, we only need you a couple of days a week, or we're only going to need you in a limited term engagement. Then if someone's really good, I think they're welcomed with open arms. You know, Quality is always the issue in the gig economy. You better be good at what you do if you're going to do the gig economy, or else it's going to be a very fast revolving door for you. And that's not a very good position to be in. But I think it's the way it goes these days. People are much more accustomed to working with people who are contractors, and that's a good thing.
Right. And, when you're building a high performing team, you have some members who are probably, not that great at what they do, and they're kind of, the weakest link in the chain. How do you handle such people?
Yeah, so I think it's the boss's responsibility to manage that sort of thing. And where we get into trouble is when people try and manage their own peers, and that's where a lot of animosity comes up. It's not a good thing. So if you have a peer who is not performing as much as you wish, first of all, try giving them some feedback. Try helping them. Try to do something positive and constructive yourself. If you do need to speak with your manager about it, it's really important that you not complain about somebody, but instead ask for some advice. So I'm working with Raja on this project, and I'm not sure he's getting it, or he committed to have something to me by Friday and I didn't get it. You can share something very objective, and then you say, what advice would you give me? How should I manage this? And what that does is, without complaining, it highlights to your manager that there might be something he or she needs to look into. There might be an issue, and it gives you the chance to get some advice and coaching about how to handle it. So if you have somebody you work with who is not performing up to snuff, first of all, it's not your call to make. And remembering that is important, and trying to deal with it yourself, or complaining about it yourself, is not going to make anything better. It's going to make things worse. So if you need to do something, help them, support them, coach them. If it's not working, highlight it to the manager, ask for some support and advice about what to do. But ultimately, the best you can do is focus on your role and doing it as well as you possibly can. So usually once you make the decision that somebody's in the wrong role and needs to change roles, or whether they're in the wrong organization, usually people, because we're nice people, usually we let that go on too long, and we get hyper focused on being fair to the person who's not performing, and we forget that the longer we try and let that person hang on, that we're actually being unfair to all the rest of the team. So you always want to have given a couple of rounds minimum of feedback and coaching, and escalating the feedback so it's clear that this is now performance that's affecting your ability to stay in the organization. Then to have one less round that says, okay, this is now officially a performance improvement plan. But you can move through those cycles in the matter of a month or two, making sure that you've checked for whether there's an issue with their personal life, whether they have health issues that need to be addressed, making sure you take in some of those sorts of things, and soliciting the advice of HR. But this is something that needs to be dealt with in 2 or 3 months, not 2 or 3 years like it sometimes can be.
And, when it comes to feedback, giving feedback, do you believe that leaders or managers should constantly, keep giving critical feedback? Or, should it just be, once or twice a year? What do you believe?
Oh, no, feedback constantly, but much, much, much more than critical feedback, giving positive feedback constantly. Sort of catching somebody. Marcus Buckingham speaks very eloquently about this topic. How do you catch somebody doing something awesome? Go, that's awesome. What was that? What made you think of that? Right? That sort of thing. So constantly is great. So what I talk about is it's really important to give very high frequency but low impact feedback. So, a little, as you're walking back from a meeting, that chance to just say, hey, I loved when you brought this up. Next time, could you also add a little more of this? So very, very, very frequently, as opposed to when we go to this treating feedback as part of a performance management process, it tends to then be very low frequency, but then the impact is very, very high, and we've had no real-time information to work on. So you should be thinking about in every interaction, how do I either provide some feedback that reinforces something they did that I think is great and I want to see more of, or give them some insight about how their actions landed that might not have been their intent so that they can continue to get better. But as frequently as possible, it's just in a way that most people wouldn't even think of as feedback. It's just constant little bits of information that help people understand. And instead of just simple praise, which is like, awesome. What was awesome? What did they say? What did they do? What did they not do? All of which gives people more information about what you think is great and what you want more of and less of. So rather than you could do this better, it should be more personalized to here's how this landed with me, or here's what I'd love to see, or here, right? So it's not judgment in the same way. It's not good or bad, because that makes us feel criticized, judged, and sometimes that creates more resistance. But instead saying, this is what really resonated with me. I love that. I'd love more of that. Or when you brought up this case example, that, got me thinking about a whole bunch of other issues, and I lost the thread. It might be better for me if that example didn't come up till later in your presentation so that I stay with you. So it's not good or bad. It's letting somebody understand how did their behavior impact you, and they may choose to use that feedback or not. And it may also be true or not true, or good or not good, but it's all you're being able to do is give them information about what was your truth.
Yeah, I think that's more important, just to be transparent and to discuss, what is it that you'd like to see as a leader. And then it's their choice whether they kind of, improve over time. Yeah. And I think that would, really, really work. Well, that brings me to the last question of this interview, Liane. If you have any other important sound bites that you'd like to leave our viewers with.
Yeah, I know conflict is something, and those hard conversations we've been talking about, like feedback or things like that, they're uncomfortable for us as humans. We have, as humans, this natural desire to connect with people, particularly people we see as part of our group. So I know it's hard. I know it's uncomfortable. But the reason I wrote The Good Fight is because some things are worth fighting for. And that's what I would encourage everyone, is to recognize that some things are worth fighting for. And if you can step up to some of those hard conversations, you'll see that you become more productive. You have higher trust, not less trust. And some of the stress of carrying those issues and resentments and grudges around go away. So some things are worth fighting for.
Absolutely. Not just be an escapist, but actually be an objectivist and use conflict to make things more productive for you. Yeah,
absolutely.
That's a wonderful message. Well, it was a pleasure talking to you, Liane, and I really appreciate your time and sharing your views with us. For me, it's really been a learning experience. So thank you so much. And
oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity.
I really had a lot of fun. You're very high energy, and I love how you put your opinions out there. I loved it. And
it's so funny. You take a keynote speaker and you put them in a little tiny box, and I probably went outside the box a few times, but trying to still be me in this new environment.
Absolutely. It's very important. So thanks a lot for that. And I'd love to stay in touch with you.
Absolutely. That would be great.
All right. Bye-bye. Take care.
Bye-bye.